Hello, everyone. I would like to thank you for attending our session, helping students help themselves, inspiring students to become strategic learners. My name is Samantha Palombizio, and I am here from Northwestern Connecticut Community College. This is my very good friend, Phillip Burnham, and he works at Manchester, Connecticut Community College. We are very good friends because we were graduate assistants together, and we shared a cubicle for quite a few years, so we are like this. We worked as graduate assistants and academic coaches together in the Learning Center at CCSU. We went through the Student Development and Higher Ed program there together. So, our to-do list for today. What is academic coaching? Exactly, or at least what me and Phil think academic coaching is. What is the model of strategic learning? Who is a strategic learner? What exactly is active learning? And what exactly does the academic coaching process look like so you can mirror that process on your campus if you choose to do so? And then we are going to try our best to leave a good amount of time for questions at the end. So, let's get going. So you probably have decided to attend this session because you most likely have encountered many students in your higher ed career that seem to be stuck in the learning process. This process, encountering this type of student can be extremely frustrating, and even worse, it can make you feel helpless as the person that's been hired to help this particular group of students. So sometimes students seem to lack the focus that they need in order to be successful. Sometimes they seem to lack the information. They can't navigate the college campus the way we all know they need to be able to in order to be successful in college and graduate on time. And also, sometimes we see students that aren't exactly able to clarify what their academic goals are or even what their future goals are. Academic coaching is a unique, specialized service that is geared towards helping students reach their academic potential. Academic coaching involves setting short-term goals for the given semester that you're working with that particular student, but it also involves talking about their long-term goals, which we all know can help that student to stay successful. Academic coaching is about relationship building. There's a lot of feedback you as the coach are going to provide to that particular student, and follow-up is an essential part of the academic coaching process. Really, the ultimate goal of the academic coaching process is for the student to be able to make good decisions, or the best decisions for them in a given academic situation. An academic coach can move a student forward in the learning process by these four categories. So, partnership. The academic coach partners with the student to develop effective and strategic learning. And we're going to talk about what we mean by strategic learning in a little while. So partnership, that's really important. You're not their teacher. You're not their parent. You're not their best friend. Sometimes I like to think about myself as a big sister to my students. And sometimes I say that. Think about me like a big sister. I'm not your parent. I'm not going to yell at you. But I'm not your best friend either. I am not going to tell you what you want to hear because I'm not interested in that. In the partnership, the coach facilitates the most effective approach to being a successful learner and degree completion. The coach develops good rapport with the student, encouraging, approachable, and friendly. Don't you want to continue to visit with people that are friendly? Don't you not want to see people ever again that are not friendly? Being friendly is very important. Again, not friends. My husband works in the business world, and his mentor always says, be friendly, but don't be friends. I think that that mantra is something that I like to incorporate in my work with students as well. The coach balances being supportive and challenging. And the reason why you want to be supportive and challenging is you want to promote self-improvement, you want to promote acquiring new skills, and you want the student to be able to take responsibility for their own learning. So at the beginning of the coaching process, which we're going to talk more about, at the beginning, it's very high touch. It's very intrusive advising. And then as you go through the process, you kind of back off a little and the student becomes increasingly more independent. Specialized support. So academic coaching can be done one-on-one or it can be done in a group setting. What we're focusing on today in this presentation is the one-on-one academic coaching process. And it's really up to the student and the coach how often you want to meet. In some student coaching relationships, you can meet as often as once a week. In other coaching relationships, you might only meet 3 times a semester, depending on your availability, their availability, and that particular student's needs. Promoting self-awareness. So how I view self-awareness in relation to being successful as a college student is seeing your personality and your values and how that connects to your goals and dreams. And that can help promote self-awareness in regards to being a successful student. Navigating the college environment. So we work on community college campuses and we see a lot of first-generation students, and we just see a lot of students that don't know what a bursar is. They don't know the difference between a drop and a withdraw. So the coach is really there next to them, their partner, their mentor, to help them through some of those situations that they've just never encountered before. The academic coach provides study strategies, general moral support, a supporting environment, but also an environment where the student is held accountable. The goal of this process is for the student to develop the necessary skills to be responsible and accountable for their own actions and decisions. So now Phil is going to talk to you about the model of strategic learning.
Okay, so this is the model of strategic learning. It was developed by Claire Weinstein. And what she did was she found that when students struggle, they struggle for one of these following areas. And I'll just name them all and then kind of go through each one. So they either struggle because they're worried about a skill, they're worried about their will, they have a concern with their self-regulation, or the social environment. So as it relates to skill, we usually hear about skills. I'm not a good test taker. I'm a terrible note taker. I'm not a good writer. I'm not a good math student. These are areas of skill. Will, do you want to do it? I think that will is the big piece, because if the student isn't motivated, none of the rest of it's going to matter. All right? So a lot of times, the overarching theme you get with will is how is what I'm doing now contributing to my overall life? Like, why should this matter to me? How does it contribute to my life plan? So when I teach IDS, one of the things I like to do with my students is put together a life goals collage. So think about all the things you want in life and get pictures out of magazines and get words, quotes, whatever you like, and throw it all on a poster board. And then they come in and they kind of showcase these posters. And like, this is why I'm here, and this is why I'm doing this. And this is how college fits into my life narrative. This is how this major fits into my life narrative. And yes, that's why I have to study geology when I'm a business major. And so I can get these things. And when I do IBS, I taught IBS at UConn, and I did this, and we had the professors come in, and we had the director of the campus came in the day their posters were displayed, and it really just helped kind of bump up their will and motivation that these people care enough to kind of show up. And they have a nice visual that I say, put it above your study station, and when when life gets tough, when you've got 3 finals on a paper due in one day, you look at that and that should help pump your will up. Self-regulation deals with managing yourself, managing your time, but also, managing yourself. So, when you open up your book bag, does it look like, a bomb exploded in your book bag? You have, separate. That's my mind used to look. Yeah, so I speak from personal experience. I've seen the light. So yeah, does your book bag look like a bomb exploded in it? Are you dedicating the right amount of hours, or are you just studying 2 hours a day when you're taking 5 classes? Because that's not going to work. So kind of getting them to actually pencil in their times, their study times, the same way they pencil in their class times actually helps. I tell students that if we have set times to do things, we're more likely to follow through and do them. But if we just say we're going to do them and we don't dedicate to when we're going to do them, particularly if they're not fun things, everything else always looks better. So study at your peak. Some people are morning people, some people are afternoon people. When's your peak? When are you most attentive? It's that self-awareness piece. And study then. Don't study at midnight if you're half asleep. Not a good use of your time. And then we have, on the outside here, we have all the things outside of the student, kind of the social environment. Do you have friends who are supportive of you being here? Or do you have friends who like to hit up the bar on Monday night? If you have friends that like to hit up the bar on Monday night and you want to be successful here, you might want to find new friends for a little while. Right? Assignment expectations. Do you understand the assignment? And this model can interact. So, for instance, a student could not understand an assignment, therefore their will to do it goes down, and therefore they procrastinate. So then we have a nice link between a social environment thing, a self-regulation piece, and a will piece. So by helping them understand the assignment, that should then bump up their will, and then they're more willing to do it, so it improves their self-regulation. So there is an interconnectedness to this model. All right? So I will pass this along to Sam, who will do what is a strategic learner.
Then we all wait for the technology. So what is a strategic learner? A strategic learner is diligent and resourceful of a learning goal. They don't give up easily, even when things get tough. The goal of the academic coach is to help students become a strategic learner. So there's a couple things that strategic learners do. They know how to set goals and take responsibility for those goals. They actively manage their own learning and monitor their progress. They learn from mistakes, and the key part is even when it's uncomfortable. So if anyone here ever studied under Dr. Jane Freed, that's what she would consider the shipwreck. 531, student development? Okay. Use effective and efficient strategies, and Phil's going to talk about active learning, and he's going to get more into that. The 4 components of being a successful student. Ask questions of new material and draw on prior knowledge. What do I know already about the information that's being presented to me? What additional information do I need to know in order to be successful on this assignment or in this course? Do I agree with what is being presented to me? How does this relate to other experiences that I've had or other topics that are being presented to me in other courses? Because isn't that the ultimate as a faculty member, to see your student make connections between what you're saying now and what you said 10 classes ago? Break down learning tasks into manageable parts. So yes, you have to organize your material when you study. That is a must. You have to break up study tasks into manageable parts. That's what we see a lot with people who struggle with time management. You need to stay tuned in to the learning objectives and the requirement of the assignment. So you need to know as a student what exactly is required from you, for each assignment in each course. You have to understand Phil was talking about teachers' expectations. Every teacher has different expectations. And part of being a strategic learner and a successful student is being able to hone in on what the differing expectations are from one professor to another. So sometimes we sit down with students and we say, pull out your syllabi. Oh, this professor put their cell phone number on their syllabus, and with an exclamation point says, text me if you have questions. Well, that's a very approachable person. That's an indicator that you should be comfortable with that particular professor. Pinpointing the meaning of an assignment and why it is important to the understanding of the course. Self-test. Again, we're going to talk more about active learning. So what is studying? Doing something active and meaningful plus self-testing. That's what studying is. It's an honest evaluation of your understanding of the material and your ability to apply the best learning strategies to address any weaknesses. So now I'm going to pass it back to Phil, and he is going to talk to you about...
I don't need that, I need that.
Oh yeah, just kidding. You mean you don't want to wear my name tag?
I don't think anybody would. Hi, I'm Samantha. Okay, so when you were an undergraduate, how did you study? So when you had a test coming up, what did you do when you needed to study something? Getting your coffee? Yes, that's a must, right? What else did you do after you got your coffee and some self-induced stupor of caffeine? Yep.
Yeah, what I had to do is I had to rewrite whatever the lecture was in my own words,
Okay.
or else I didn't learn it.
Rewriting. All right.
But in her own words.
But in your own. Okay.
And I also was very good about pinpointing exactly the expectations of the faculty.
Okay.
It's a gift.
That's a gift. That's a gift. How about some other people? What did you do when you needed to study? Note cards. And what did you put on the note cards? And definitions and phrases. Okay. All right. How about somebody else? One more. Read the book. Yep. Yeah, so a lot of rereading, a lot of rewriting, a lot of note cards with words on them. All right? So Edgar Dale did a study back in 1946, and he found that passive learning, like reading or listening or looking, 2 weeks later, you're only going to remember at most 30% of that. So then we have to ask ourselves, is that real learning? If you're going to perform well for a test and then forget about it, did you really learn it? So whereas things like dramatic presentations and teaching it to somebody else and having intellectual discussions and actually creating something, that upped your retention up to 90% 2 weeks later. Right? So a lot of our students study in the ways that were described in the beginning, I would argue, that they make note cards with a phrase on it and a definition, and they reread the book, and they come in and they perform for you, and then 2 weeks later they can forget it. So as educators, is that ultimately successful? I think that I would argue that we want to push our students down toward the bottom of this pyramid so that they can retain up to 90% well after the test is done. All right? So now the question becomes, how do we get students to study actively? All right? Now, I would define an active strategy as anything in question form. When you study, your strategies need to be question-based. What would be the benefit of a question-based strategy?
But you're also putting it in a way, a context.
Mm-hmm.
So they start to think about something that you're presenting in such a way that how would you then use that? That draws them out to look at what it is you're trying to communicate in a way that they then have to internalize and then spit out again.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, it's like rereading and rewriting it again, but by having them discuss or present, they're being compelled to think about this and own it.
Yes, yes. Yeah, they have to think deeper, right? It's not enough just to remember a definition. Like, where's that going to get you? But you have to be able to use it. Do you want to say something?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I've
15-year-old, and every time I'm asking him, what do you do with your phone, he's like, I'm using Quiznotes. And I'm like, what is that? It's an app that takes notes and turns them into question and answers to study.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why can't we tell our students about these things?
Yeah.
Because our students miss the boat on some of that technology.
There really is an app for everything.
There is an app.
There's an app for that. You look like you had your hand up? No?
Yeah, I was just going to say fosters critical thinking.
Yes. Yes, you really do. You want to foster critical thinking. So all your student study strategies, push them, compel them to study in question form. Now, the key to that is you have to ask the right questions. So everybody remember this? Okay? So you have to ask the right questions. So Bloom came up with this model a while back, dividing knowledge into 6 different levels, right? And at its most basic level is remember, which is, I would argue, where most of our students think of when they think of studying. I just have to remember this. I don't have to comprehend it in any way. I don't have to make connections between things. I don't have to evaluate whether this is right or not, because this teacher says it's right and that's good enough for me, right? And so going up a notch is understanding. So now not only can you spit it back out to me, but can you demonstrate that you understand it? So anytime you ask a student, to give an example or to elaborate on some point, what you're doing is you're testing their understanding of it. Applying it is using the material in different contexts, similar to a math exam. You take the steps and you apply them to a new set of numbers, so using the material in new situations. Analysis is when you break the information down and look for those connections between things that we talked about, right? And then you have to evaluate it. Does this make sense? What are the pros and the cons? What are the implications? And then ultimately you have to create a new whole, possibly a new project, a new knowledge base for yourself. And as you move up the continuum, you're thinking more and more critically, getting back to that critical thinking. All right? So we're talking about active strategies. Why don't we all get a little active with our studying? So I'll show you one tool that you can use with your students that rely on this question approach. It's called the question chart. All right? So it looks like a chart. And I'm so glad this writes. I was unsure whether it would be infinite or not. All right. So this is a chart for all intents and purposes. All right? So there are a couple rules for constructing these question charts correctly. But if a student does this correctly, any question you ask on that exam should appear somewhere in this question chart. All right? So we'll make one. Anybody in the market to buy anything right now? A phone, a house, a pet?
Car.
A car. All right. So we'll go with car. All right? So the first rule is you want a big picture title. So if we're looking at cars, what's our big picture? I'm sorry?
Safety, money.
All right, so those are elements possibly, but if we're just looking at cars and we're looking for a title, what can we title this question chart?
What car should I buy?
What car should I buy? Right. All right, so these are big picture tools, so that's your big picture title. All right, so the first rule to constructing these things is you want a big picture title that encompasses the entire thing. All right. Second rule is you want different themes along the top, all right? So if we're looking at cars, what type of car are you going to buy?
Chevy.
Chevy. All right, that's a theme, right? What type of car is somebody else going to buy? A Subaru. And just one more, just a Honda. All right, so we got our themes along the top. So the second rule is you want themes along the top. Then you want your questions down the side here, because these are question charts. So if you're looking at these cars as a consumer, what types of questions do you want to be asking yourself as you're contemplating buying this car? All right. What are the safety features
Should that column also be in the form of a question, it looks like?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, you want questions down the side of this car. And then you just go through and you put all your answers in. All right? And how about another question?
What is the cost?
What is the cost of this car? I should also mention another rule is your students, they don't want any yes or no answers in this question chart. You want nice, rich, complex answers so you can draw out those connections and really learn the material. If you're just answering yes or no, you're not moving up this model. So you want nice, rich, complex answers. All right? And I have one more space, so how about one more question? What is the mileage on this car? All right? And so I just go through, I go back through my material, I find all the information, and I put it down there. So the actual studying is the actual creation of this model, because now we're asking questions in the material and we're creating something. All right? How many people found it exciting to go home and reread their textbook? That sounds like a drag to me. Nobody wants to reread a textbook, right? So that's going to impact the student's will, right? But you want to tell your students that studying should not be boring. You want to be thinking through the material and actively doing something so you're not sitting there bored and your mind is wandering. You're not getting anything out of that. Now, I did say that if you do these right, any question that you throw on that assessment should appear somewhere in this question chart. So let me demonstrate that. Let's say that you gave the student a multiple choice exam, right? And the question is, what is the cost of the Subaru? And here's answer A, here's answer B, and here's answer C. Which box has my answer? The middle one, the B, right? So B is my answer. Now let's say that you don't like multiple choice and you want to do essays, right? And you say, compare the mileage of the Chevy with the mileage of the Honda. Which boxes have the answers? Compare this information with this one. All right? So it allows them to see all the information in one space. It allows them to make those connections, and that's an analysis task. It allows them to create something. That's a creation task. And ultimately, they have to find the material and understand it well enough to compile it into a chart. Right? So those are question charts. But you want to ask the right questions. Right? So if you don't ask the right questions over here, this study strategy is not going to be useful to you, right? So you want to show your student, where you're focusing on your exams. So you'll see off to the side here, there's little words off to the side, right? If I see that word in a question, that means that the person who asked me that question is focusing on that level, on the Bloom's taxonomy, right? So you want the student to kind of gear into where the teacher is focusing on the exam and to ask themselves similar types of questions when they study. Because ultimately, studying is kind of prepping to take an exam, so you want the student to ask themselves the types of questions they're going to be asked on the actual exam they're going to take. Right? I mean, just rereading a textbook makes about as much sense, to prep for an exam makes about as much sense as kind of jogging to prepare for a swim meet. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Right? So you want to train your brain to answer the types of questions that the professor is going to be focusing on the exam, and a question chart is one practical way in which you can do that. Right? Are there any questions about that? Okay. So now we're going to take you through an actual coaching model, and Sam is going to do the first piece.
So you want to establish rapport. We talked about this a little bit, but you want the student to feel comfortable with you to really tell you exactly what's going on. A lot of times students will be working with an academic coach because they're on academic probation and they need to get off of academic probation. That was a lot of what Phil and I did in the Learning Center. But sometimes students are coming to an academic coach not because they're necessarily on academic probation, but maybe they have a lower GPA and they desire having a more competitive GPA. So it's very important that they can talk to you about exactly what's going on and exactly what barriers are getting in their way. It's also very important that the rapport is there so you as the coach can speak relatively freely with the student. So if a student comes to you and says, it's very important for me to do well this semester. But then through conversation, you discover that they went out with friends the day before a midterm. It's important that you feel comfortable saying, hey, Jane Doe, you know, I remember you telling me and expressing to me how important it is that you do well this semester, but it's seeming like you're maybe letting some other areas of your life trump the area that at the beginning of the semester you told me your academics were most important to you right now. So they need to feel comfortable telling you what's going on, and you need to be comfortable being frank with them to a degree, of course. So it's not a waste of your time to kind of have some of that fluff conversation at the beginning of the relationship so that you can both be comfortable, so you can create that real partnership that we were talking about. You want to spend some time getting to know the strengths and weaknesses and identifying areas for improvement. So like Phil was talking about before with the model of strategic learning, both of us have been known to put the model in front of a student and at least ask them to point to the areas where they think they have some weaknesses. Because for us, it's really relatively easy for us to verbalize some of these things. But they might have never used a phrase before like teachers' expectations or social support. They might not be able to exactly verbalize to you where they think their strengths and weaknesses lie. You want to set goals. I put SMART goals here because it does kind of get across the point. You want to have goals. You want them to be challenging. You want them to be realistic. And you do want your goals to be specific. So when Phil was talking about before, yeah, instead of just saying, I'm going to study math this week. Okay, well, exactly how much time are you going to study math this week? Where exactly are you going to study math this week? Would you like to look into tutoring? Should we look into it right now? Should we print the tutoring schedule? Should we highlight the times on the tutoring schedule that you're going to attend this week? I've been accused of hand-holding before. A lot of other academic coaches have been accused of hand-holding before. Some students need that at the beginning. So that's kind of our take on the academic coaching process. Academic coaching is a little bit more intrusive than some other theories that you can use when working with students. You want to set up a framework for future sessions and create a plan. So I've used an academic recovery plan before. I've used an academic action plan before. I'm sure a lot of you in this room have worked with probationary students before. Sometimes it's required that you fill out forms and sign them and all of that kind of stuff. And those things can work great. But even if you don't have that, just writing down like 3 to-do items on a Post-it and give it to the student and say, can you do these 3 things for me between now and the next time we get together? Having some sort of concrete plan. And coming up with a very specific study plan for some students can be helpful. The exact what are you going to do, exactly when, and exactly where are you going to do these tasks. Make recommendations, workshops, tutoring, office hours, advisor. Oh, you don't know who your advisor is? Let me pull that information up for you. Let me print your curriculum sheet. Let me highlight your advisor's contact information. Financial aid. That's very important to all students, especially ours at the 2-year schools. Work hours. So that's a really touchy subject for a lot of students. And I used to be a little intimidated about approaching that topic with students, but if you ask a student what got in your way last semester, for a lot of my students, it's I was working too much. Okay, so the first question is, every single hour that you're working at your job, is that absolutely imperative for your lifestyle? You have to feel comfortable asking that, or at least that's what I think. And then if they say, yes, I have to work all of those hours, then you have to accept that as the academic coach. But what you can say, and that's where that rapport comes in, you know, you've been working at your job 50 or 60 hours a week, and you've been attempting a full-time course load. Take a look at the transcript, point out what you're talking about. You know, you've had 3 consecutive unsuccessful semesters doing what you're doing. Would you consider reducing your course load by a little bit to up your chances of being more academically successful? That can be tough if you are meeting with a student after the last day to add or drop classes, but having that frank conversation, you know, there are some students that can work full-time and go to school full-time, and that's great, but usually the students that are coming to see you in an academic coaching capacity, those are the students that desire increasing their grades. So you have to be able to have those types of conversations. And Phil is going to talk to you a little bit about the second phase.
All right, so in many ways, the second phase is the least structured of the 3 phases. It really kind of depends on your individual student and your relationship with them and kind of what their exact story is and what their struggles are. So it's about listening to the student and then kind of hearing out their struggles and their concerns and their passions and kind of gearing the session to that, keeping that model strategic learning in your mind or out there with a student and saying, okay, so what I'm hearing is you're really struggling with a skill. Let me show you how to do question charts, or let me show you how to do Cornell note taking, or let me show you a new reading strategy. Or right now you're really struggling with will. Tell me more about why you're here, why you chose the major, how your major speaks to your skills, your values, your interests. When I teach student development, I have them do a journal each week about. Sometimes I give a prompt about why you here, how is what you're doing contributing to that. Are you working towards your goals? Where your holdups, and just having them kind of reflect on that and write about it a little bit. I find really helps them kind of understand kind of why they're here and what they're struggling with and what they need from you. You want to constantly revisit goals. So this process is circular. So it's not like, well, in the first meeting, we said we were going to do this, this, and this, and that's that. It's kind of, well, you said you were going to do this, and how is that working? And, our last meeting, you said you'd get, all A's this semester, and you got your history test back, and it's a C. Is an A still doable in history this semester? Because if you set the bar too high, goals become a demotivator. So you want to have a nice balance of challenge and support, right? And you constantly always want to applaud any little bit of progress. Anything you see. If a student usually is copiously late, just like 10, 20 minutes late, and this week he showed up on time, acknowledge that. The last 3 meetings, you left me sitting here for 20 minutes, and today you're on time. I'm happy with that. That shows some progress. Any little thing you can applaud makes such a difference with these students. And proud. I'm proud of you. I'm happy to see that you're doing well. Students want to be around people who are proud of them. I think that makes quite a difference. All right. So now the last phase.
Stand really close this whole time so we don't have to do this anymore. The final meeting, this is really all about ending the semester as strong as possible, going into the final crunch time. So you want to review the semester and evaluate progress. So what actually worked for you this semester? What do you want to continue doing even after this semester ends in order for you to be successful the rest of your duration in college? Evaluate progress. Like Phil said, I totally agree. If anyone here knows anything about appreciative advising, it's not about beating the student down for all of the mistakes that they've made. It's saying, oh, you did really good in this class. What strategies did you use there that we can maybe modify a little bit, but apply those strategies to your other subject areas as well? Final encouragements, very important. You did really well this semester. I'm very proud of you. Just that, I'm very proud of you, that can be a very powerful statement for a student who's never heard that before. I'm very proud of you. The other thing that can be very important during this phase is really talking explicitly about how they're going to get through the final crunch time. So exactly what the student's going to do on each day to prepare for each final. Talk with the student about how they're going to manage the non-academic areas of their life while they're committing these extra study hours that they're going to need to commit going into final crunch time. Talk with the student about how they're going to handle any inevitable stress that comes along with finals. So it's really about being proactive. So you're going to have to commit extra time to your academics. How are you going to deal with that? You probably are going to have a few moments where you get unbelievably stressed out. How are you going to deal with those moments? Ask the student if there's any particular strategies that they would like to review before they go into final crunch time. And talk about future goals and moving forward. I mean, it's not pleasant to be in the library for 8 straight hours preparing for a final, but why are you doing this? How does this experience of going to the library for a long amount of time, how is that going to impact your future goals? And moving forward, so we were talking about at the beginning, it's very high touch, it's very intrusive. Exactly what strategies, exactly what resources, and exactly what skills is the student going to utilize after your academic coaching relationship either ends or it becomes less and less intrusive. Maybe the first semester you saw the student every week. Maybe next semester you're only going to see them once a month. Or maybe you're only going to see them 3 times. And maybe after that, it'll only be an occasional email when they really need something from you. I know we left almost no time for questions, but does anybody have questions? I guess. Or comments? Again, I really do apologize for not leaving time for questions. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Hi. Thank you. Thank you for coming.